I'm going. Okay, we good? We're good. I first knew I wanted to run my own business when I was 8 years old. I always knew I wanted to run my own business. I knew I was an entrepreneur and I knew that's what I was going to do. I started my first company in 2011, my first proper, actual, real company, limited, company's house, the full shebang, everything ready to go. But I gave up the job that I was in and went into running my company full time, which meant I had no income. And I ran that company successfully, unsuccessfully, you take your pick. But in 2013, in early 2013, that company failed and fundamentally closed by way of sale. And that was a really hard, difficult time for a number of reasons. It was very difficult financially. I was left with £83,000 worth of debt that I had to deal with. I had bailiffs banging on the door of my house because I ran the business from the front room. But what was harder again was having to accept the failure and having to front up to the failure and go, this is something I'm going to have to deal with, and I'm going to have to go, how do I get past this as a person? But it's an important part of the journey, and I think it's a part that when people tell me they've gone through, I smile and I'm like, it's okay, because that's how you learn to get it right. Fast forward to where we are today. We run a group of companies under the Cove Group brand. We have some attractions, we have property, we have a small amount of investments, we have a small amount of events, and we're looking to move into the hotel world. There's other industries I'd like to look at and go into, and we go through our ups and downs, the ebbs and the flows of business, just like anybody else. And right now, we're definitely in an ebb, but I can see where we're coming through for a flow. And I think that, again, it's the highs and the lows of the business of where we are at different points. And for me, it's about momentum, it's about consistency, and it's about believing in your vision of where you're trying to go, and then having really, really good people to help take us there. And then I've had different businesses throughout. I actually spent a good 10 years working for other companies, figuring different things out, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be, which industries to be in, and just learning, just absorbing and learning and learning and learning. I could have spent my 20s running my own companies and learning that way, but I actually spent my 20s and my early 30s, but my 20s very much so, working for other people and learning that way. And then started my first proper company when I came into 2011. So I'd been 28, I think, 28, 29. And and ran that for a couple of years, and it failed, which was a shame. And it failed for a few different reasons, but one of the key reasons was I didn't understand the business I was running. I thought I was running a health company, and actually I was running a technology company. Had I realized that in 2012, 2013, at the peak of where technology companies were starting to really grow, wow, who knows where it would have gone. I've then spent some time working for another business who absorbed basically my company, and spent a good few years working for them. But in the meantime, I was setting up other businesses. So I was importing inflatable stand-up paddle boards in 2013 from China, and we're importing them via crates, via containers. So basically 20-foot containers would turn up in Dover, filled with inflatable paddle boards, and then they would get shipped to my house. And I literally had them piled up floor to ceiling in my front room. That's my phone. I'm just gonna have to get this one. What were we talking about?
Paddleboards.
Oh, paddleboards. So I was bringing in paddleboards. So I was doing that. So that was one thing I was doing. I was basically throwing mud at a wall to see what stuck. I'd had a friend who had started a car advertising business, which just coincidentally was a company that I'd looked at when I was in Australia traveling for a year. And he'd set everything up, but then had not taken it to actually go live. So I'd bought this database off him for £500 and had that set up. So that was churning online, just getting information coming through as a business to go. I started building website apps and then mobile apps because I saw a gap in the market in the election space where people of a younger generation didn't understand about different parties necessarily and who to vote for or why to vote for them, what people stood for. So I created this app all around electorals called UK Elections. And I realized very quickly, if I put an option on there for people to vote for which party there is, I know where they live, I know how old they are, I know the gender they are, I know loads of information about them from what they work and everything they fill in on their profile, and I knew who they're going to vote for. I must be able to monetize that data. We were running a stand-up paddleboard media business where we were going to different events and races and covering it and sharing online magazines effectively. So we're running that as well. And then I had this crazy idea that I could turn a prison into a tourist attraction. So I was doing effectively these 6 or 7 businesses, and I was working full-time. So I took these 6 or 7 ideas and was doing all of these simultaneously, effectively, all running together and working full time. And I was seeing what stuck, and paddleboards started taking off. You know, inflatable paddleboards started selling really well. So I was like, is that where we go? And I had a company called Paddle Nation. Funnily enough, the one that was really stagnating or stalling was the prison. And that went on for about a year and a half. I was just doing all these different projects, and I still had £83,000 worth of debt that I was paying off at that time at £1 a month. It was something crazy like 400 years. It was going to take me to pay the debt. It was a long time. And really it was a case of, right, what's going to stick first? Because I knew I wasn't going to stay in the job I was in. It was very much I was contracted in for a period of time, and then what was going to happen when I found my next idea. 6 different companies, working full time, and trying to figure out, if you throw enough at the wall, what's going to stick. Yeah, the prisons was an interesting journey, and again, it is a journey of true entrepreneurship. It's a journey of true grit, true determination. Although I would say it's a journey of just pure stubbornness on my part, just a relentlessness to just make it work, having a bit between your teeth and going, I am going to make that work. Really, we should have purchased Shepton. That was the idea, was trying to buy Shepton initially, and that's where the whole idea, the concept, the whole plan, everything stemmed from. But it didn't come off. When we weren't successful in buying the prison, I thought to myself, I'm not willing to let this idea go. What I need to do is see whoever's bought the prison, if they would A, sell it to me, which is unlikely, but B, let me run it as a pop-up for a period of time. But I didn't know who was running them. I had no idea, I didn't know who had bought them. I had no idea. The MOJ wouldn't announce it. So I did some research and I drew up a list of about 6 or 7 companies UK-wide that I thought were big enough and in that space to be able to do something with the prison. And I just sent all these emails, and it was basically saying, hey, I think you might have bought Shepton Mallet Prison. I tried to buy it. I was also a bidder, but I was unsuccessful. I'd really like to open up a tourist attraction, or open it as a tourist attraction and do some all these different programs, and here's my idea. Would you be open to a conversation? So I sent all of these emails off, and I had an email back from Trevor Osborne, who basically just very short email to say, hi Joel, thanks for your message. I haven't bought Shepton Mallet Prison, although I did look at it, but it wasn't one for us. However, I've just bought Shrewsbury Prison in Shropshire. Would you be interested in coming to have a look at that? And that's how it started. I had a short email exchange with Trevor. I had a look at it, and he turned around and said, what do you think? And I went, yeah, it's great. Yeah, we could definitely make this work. And he went, okay, well, I'm going to spend a year doing planning. So you take it over for a year, and in a year's time, do it for a year, do your tourism thing for a year. And then we'll develop it and you can move out and that's all fine. I was like, okay. And he went, we'll work out all the details later. But yeah, fine, done. Shook my hand. And that was that. At the time, I'd had to borrow the money from my dad to drive up to Shrewsbury, to the prison, to actually view it with Trevor. So it was kind of a difficult time financially. But yeah, I just had pure belief that we would make it work. I did meet with Trevor some months later, but nearly a year later, I met with him and was chatting with him and stuff. And we'd been trading for nearly a year, and we'd done really, really well. We'd gone through a good few £100,000 in our first year. We'd made really good profits. And Trevor turned around to me and went, I'll be straight with you, Joel. I thought you'd last 6 weeks. He thought the business model was a 6-week model. And then years later, we purchased the place off him. So when I moved into Shrewsbury in 2015 and took over the prison and started here, I was still working full time for a company in London. So I was still working for them 40 hours a week. I was running a business as a startup out of a 4-acre prison with just nothing more than an idea and all of this debt. And I was still selling paddleboards. So when I moved up here, I brought all the paddleboards with me and I stored them in the prison. So I was actually shipping them into the prison and shipping them out of the prison because Jordan's asking me where. I had them in a store cupboards downstairs in the bottom of the gate lodge. So like I had them underneath, basically, just stored up in piles of boxes. I'll have photos somewhere of just all of these things stored up. And I thought, this is great because I need storage space. And what better than a prison? It's secure, it's dry, it's a bit cold. But yeah, so I had that. But I didn't have any money, so I was living in the prison for the first month when I took over, whilst we started building the business. I think I've told that story a lot. The elections had come and gone, so I stopped running the election app and just closed that down effectively. I stopped using the database app for advertising for cars, but what I did do is I took the entire database and I folded that into the prison mailing list, all under the same company banner. This is long before GDPR was a big thing. So I folded that in. So I had all of these email addresses, and I thought, actually, I'll grab all the email addresses as well off the election app. So I grabbed all these email addresses, and then I grabbed all the email addresses off our Paddle Nation side of things, and I pulled them all in. So I had a really good sort of size mailing list to get started with for the prisons, and that got me some traction in the media. It just got us noise. I'd already set up what was Cove Group. That was already there as sort of like a company in behind the scenes, and I had already in my mindset, I'd written it years before, that I wanted to have this group of companies underneath this overarching brand, similar to something like a Virgin, for example, with different businesses in different industries, all running independently, and I could see that future, I could see that picture, that vision. And that's what I spent the last 10 years pretty much doing. The next push, though, is into hotels. That is my vision, that is my goal, that is the next idea, and that's very much what I'm actually waiting for. I'd like to build hotels. So we've got 3 hotels I'd like to build, but in order to get there, I feel like we need to be running a hotel in the first place. So we're actually looking at acquiring a hotel. And I get asked what that end goal is, and there isn't one really. I'm kind of reminded of something that Trevor said to me once when we were meeting, and we were talking about different things we've been through, and this guy's had so much more experience, another 40 years on top of what I have had, so he's incredibly knowledgeable. He was asked once whether because he's a developer, he's a property developer, and somebody asked him once whether he'd been a property developer all of his life, and his response was, not yet. There's so much more to do, and my wife always says to me, I'll never retire. And I think that's true, I really do. I don't think I'll ever retire. So for me, I think I'll do this probably to the day I die. I just wanted to be an entrepreneur. And then once upon a time, I just wanted to sell key rings. These things change. And once upon a time, I thought I would just operate a prison tourism attraction for 12 months as a pop-up. Well, you've done it for me. I'll just say, my name's Joel, and I'm an entrepreneur. And I banged the mic on the way out. My name's Joel, and I'm an entrepreneur.